Hi, Jenni here, and the beginning of the year of 2026 has been very politically unstable, and a lot has happened within just the first few weeks of the year. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that and show my solidarity. There has been so much going on. First of all, the genocide and atrocities in Palestine, Sudan, the Congo, they are continuing on despite ceasefire efforts in Gaza. That's going on. The war in Ukraine, Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine is still continuing on. We're marking about 4 years. The US threatened Greenland, but also bombed Venezuela. I feel like we moved really quickly from the bombing of Venezuela. The ISIS also targeting, attacking, kidnapping, killing people in America. And they've been doing this for years, but it has intensified a lot recently. People in Iran are fighting for freedom. Kurdish people in Rojava are defending their democracy and equality. Actually, that's why I have a braid on for this video, in solidarity with Kurdish women who have been targeted by extremists. And there has been so much going on. I probably don't even know about all of it, and there's a lot going on in my home country, Finland, too. And I just wanted to take this moment to remind everyone, don't be alone, be with your community, be with your friends, try to participate in organizing if you can, and really just try to educate yourself and learn what is going on and be an ally. Yes, reading for entertainment and escapism is totally understandable, but please also read to learn and to educate yourself. So here are the books that I read in the month of January 2026. The first book I read was Saamelaiskiista, sortaako Suomi alkuperäiskansaansa, which translates to the Sami question, does Finland oppress their indigenous people? And short answer is yes. It was written by Veli-Pekka Lehtola, who is of Sami and Finnish background. Yes, Finland has oppressed the Sami people for a really, really long time. The Sami people arrived to the area that is now Northern Europe around 1500 BC, and the Finnish people arrived to what is now Finland around 800 BC, so there's like a few hundred years between. And then later on, Sweden started to rule over the area what is now Finland, did that for about 500 years. Then Russia ruled over Finland for about another 100, and then Finland formed a state in 1917, and part of it was on the Sapmi, which is the name to refer to the indigenous lands of Sami people. Here is the map that shows like the current Sapmi region. And yeah, Finnish people have oppressed and discriminated against Sami people in many ways. I will provide sources in the description for the different ways Sami people have been oppressed in Finland. But for example, through settled colonialism, Sami people have been pushed to north. Sami children were forced into boarding schools to learn Finnish, and they were abused if they didn't speak in Finnish. Even Finnish scientists with major quotation marks, did eugenics studies on the skulls of Sami people to see how they differ from Finnish people. It's all so fucked. In this book, however, the discussion is focused on the political and online conversations around the 2010s regarding the law about saamelaiskäräjät, which in English is the Sami Parliament of Finland, and who gets to vote there, and who is considered to be Sami, to be indigenous. And the book also discusses how some Finnish people have organized themselves to claim indigeneity and to claim that they are actually the oppressed minority and that they are actually the Sami people of North. The law that is notably discussed in this book, which dictates who can vote at saamelaiskäräjät, actually passed in 2025, and this book was released in 2015. So like 10 years later only this law passed. And even before that, there have been decades of trying to make saamelaiskäräjät law more equal among the Sami people. The law says that if you have at least one grandparent who has learned a Sami language as their mother tongue, you are eligible to vote at saamelaiskäräjät. This book also discusses the meaning of what it means to be considered Sami, not just in saamelaiskäräjät, but in community. And one of the most notable arguments was that one must have a connection to living, modern, current Sami culture. So while reading this book, I learned a lot about the political discussions of the 2010s around this topic. I felt secondhand embarrassment when reading this book because I didn't know just how organized these Finnish people who claim to be Sami are. I knew of the topic and I've known about the oppression of Sami people, but I didn't know about this specific aspect of it. And I just felt really, really embarrassed as a Finnish person. But I also felt appreciation about learning about this discussion. Even though the book was released in 2015, I think it included a lot of relevant information to this day. So while I had knowledge prior to reading the book, I did learn a lot of new things as well. While I was reading that book, I was also reading Dust Settles Snows by Dina Elgenaidi, apologies. And I had to DNF that one. It just wasn't for me. It didn't really give a lot of time for the reader to figure out things themselves, and it stated the obvious quite often, and I am really sad that the book didn't work out because thematically it seemed really interesting, but what can you do? The second book I read was Rosarita by Anita Desai. I felt a slight slump after that DNF, so I decided I would go with a short story or like a short book to get back to reading. This is about a young student in Mexico who has traveled from India to study language in Mexico, and suddenly she encounters a complete stranger who seemed to have known her mom, who had also studied art in Mexico. But Bonita, the student, did not know about this at all. This book is told in a second-person narrative, which I absolutely love. I feel like it should be utilized in literature more. And it's very dizzying, very existential. Oftentimes you do question, what do you even know while reading this? What do you know about the characters? Are the characters being told the truth? And I thought that was really exciting and thrilling. It also connects the history of trains within the partition of India in 1947, and then how trains were used in the Mexican Revolution in 1910s, which was a totally unexpected bridge for me, but a really interesting addition to the story. I like this. Maybe it's a bit existential and the ending is very vague, but still a very interesting reading experience. The next book I read is The Manual for Good Wives by Lola J, and it's a historical fiction which tells the story of Princess Adekunpe Temitope, and we know her as Temi while reading. And she is a young teenage girl in the beginning of the novel in 1860s, and she's forced into a marriage and motherhood by a chief in her community. The location wasn't specifically mentioned, if I remembered correctly, but it is based on the modern day Nigeria. Obviously, Temi becomes miserable and really struggles with the reality she's been put into, but she and the love of her life, Olu, who is from a different town from hers, they decide to escape to Britain. And while in Britain, they start to cultivate their own life and their own success, and they just try their best to thrive in a new environment. Unfortunately, tragedy hits and Demi is forced to find a way for her family, and the generations that come after her on her own. There is also an alternative present-day timeline in which Landry, a London-based copywriter, gets suddenly proposed to by her boyfriend. They hadn't discussed it before. She has complex feelings about it. So she decides to escape her reality and move temporarily into the family home that she has inherited from her family. I absolutely love this book. I love historical fiction. I think it's my favorite genre, and this is very quintessential historical fiction. Everyone who enjoys historical fiction should read this. I love the character of Demi because she was very complex, very flawed, but always just tried to find a way out of her turmoil and her hard times. I also love how literature and reading are woven into this story as like a lifeline. And it also highlights the history of the Black community in the UK, especially Black women's history in the UK. Now, Temitope was not a real character, but some side characters that are mentioned were real, and some of the events that took place were real. So, very, very excellent. I really enjoyed this book. The last book I read for the month of January is The Singularity by Balsam Karam, translated by Saskia Vogel. And this tells the story of two women. The first one is in an unnamed coastal city home to many refugees, and she is searching for her missing child. She has 4 children in total, and one of them, I think the oldest one, has gone missing. And she's trying to find her, but no success, no luck. And ultimately, in her desperate moment, she decides to throw herself off into the sea. The second woman, who is in this town on a business trip and is heavily pregnant, sees this moment of despair and ends up suffering a miscarriage herself. She gives birth to a stillborn baby. This is all in the back cover, so I'm not really spoiling too much of the story. So as you can imagine, this book discusses grief, loss, motherhood, and very heavy themes, but all of them are discussed really, really delicately. And I love that these two characters are completely in different countries, do not know each other at all, but they have common experiences, obviously unique to themselves, but still they share a lot in common. There's a red thread between them. For example, being of refugee background, struggling with loss and grief, and of, having to leave behind your home country and so on. The book is divided into 5 parts, and each part uses a different type of narration. When discussing the second woman, the author uses second-person narrative, which I love, once again. But there is also very lyrical writing in this book. It really challenges how novels are structured, in my opinion, and it does that really, really well. And yeah, I think I would suggest this to someone who is intrigued by books about grief and about all the different losses that one has when becoming a refugee. I would also really recommend this to anyone who enjoys books that challenge the structure of novels and narration. This was really, really excellent in my opinion. Alright, so those were the books that I read during the month of January. I really enjoyed all of these books and I learned a lot from them. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one. Bye!